Hello, welcome to Black Comics Universe. I am your host, Imani Latif of Peep Game Comics. You're watching Black Comics Universe presented by Peep Game Comics exclusively here on The Experience. Please help us out by hitting share and giving us a like and follow. Then make sure to tune in for our original programming 7 days a week. The Black Comics Universe streams every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern on all DSPs. That's Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter. Tonight, my guests are Matthew Clark and Nigel Lynch of Beyond Publishing and the creative minds behind the book Hard Ears that was released on Abram Books, the imprint, John Jennings imprint, Megascope. And I'd like to bring those guests in. Broadcasting live from the island of Barbados.
Hi, good night.
What's up, fellas?
Thanks for having us and happy to be here. Hello, everybody.
Yeah. I just want to give you guys a moment to introduce yourselves and what you do, what your specialties are. I can start with you, Matthew.
Hi, good night. I'm Matthew Clark. I'm a writer and illustrator. I'm one of the founding members of Beyond Publishing. I've always been into drawing comic books, even from school days and little notebooks, and it's always been a passion of mine. I actually work as a graphic designer by day, but at night, I'm a comic book creator.
That's me too. I'm a graphic designer by trade myself. And Nigel, yourself?
Hi, my name is Nigel Lynch, and I'm a writer for the same Beyond Publishing. I'm one of the founding members, and by day I work in architecture.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. I appreciate you guys taking this time out of your day. We are actually, ironically, are all in the same time zone, so to speak. So that's good. I want to get started on you. What is the comic book culture like in Barbados?
Is a diverse culture. I mean, people are into manga. People are also into like Western comics, your Marvel, your DC, but we also get some UK comics. So I grew up reading 2000 AD, their anthology with Judge Dredd. See, what happens is we get a mixture of stuff that just come down from stores from various suppliers. So you really don't know what you're going to see. Also, I used to read Tauntaun.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah, by Hero J as a child.
For me, comic books, I kind of got started in comic books from when I was in secondary school, and I'd saved my lunch money. And back then, you could get comic books anywhere. There used to be in stores, shops. Everybody had a corner where you could get a comic book. And you did miss a few issues, but if you had a good place, you could kind of like continue to get these series one after the other. So when I was younger, I used to read a lot of Marvel, a lot of Hulk. I was into Hulk, Conan, Punisher, that kind of stuff. And I was also into art in school. So I always wanted to create comic books, but I never felt my artwork was up to standard. So, and then as I went into the writing of the comic books after that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's access like to comic books now? Is it more are there comic book shops, or like do you guys lean heavily on digital?
Yeah, there used to be a full-fledged comic book store. In fact, Alan. There were several in like the 80s, the 90s, up to the early 2000s, and then they kind of dwindled off, or they began to specialize more into retailing video game and entertainment, and they kind of fell off. But there are bookstores who will bring in comic books from time to time, but they're not as commonplace as they were when I was growing up. But the comic culture, ironically, is a lot larger. We have a comic convention here now called the Anime Con, and there's a big cosplayer community. Of course, all the comic book films are huge. Even series that people didn't know were comics, like Snowpiercer and Sweet Tooth, and all of those are fairly popular here. So it's ironic that the culture has grown, but it's kind of harder, at least here, to access books like one time.
Yeah, you don't get the floppies like you used to. You would get trades. So bookstore would kind of bring in some trades or compile series, or you could order a book, a hardcover. But as Matthew said, the stores that had your floppies kind of went away.
So what was it about comics that inspired you all to start your own publishing company?
I love telling stories and I love drawing, so it was a natural marriage of the two. And you know, when you're into video games, you're into comic books, you tend to have a circle of friends, and we live on a small island, so it's not hard to then run into people or get introduced to new people. I actually met Nigel in the supermarket. And I was graduating. We were selling the first book I ever did, Mass Anthology, and Nigel was there. His son was a baby at the time with a pram and a milk bottle, and he was like, "Wait, this is a Barbadian comic," and I was like, "Yeah, sure." And we exchanged numbers. We began to talk and correspond, and we started playing video games together. And then because I was working on another project, so then when I cleared that, I started the first project I worked on with Nigel was something called Diary of the Stray Dogs. But that never saw the light of day. And then I went on to work with Nigel on Life and Death in Paradise.
Yeah.
And that was the first kind of big Beyond Publishing title. And it's funny because we are now working on the same Diary of the Stray Dogs. One issue is released for free already.
Yeah, this is the...
This is Life and Death. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Life and Death in Paradise. This is your first book with under your publishing company, Beyond Publishing.
Yeah, that's the first book we kind of collaborated on. That was my brainchild, and that's the first one me and Matthew kind of cut our teeth on as a team, and it was very interesting creating it. I was new into writing, didn't know about writing a comic book script. There's a lot of things that we cut our teeth on, mistakes that were made, things that everything we did, we kind of improved on as we went forward. So with every project we do, we kind of get better. We learn from the mistakes we have made from before. So it was good to see. And then sometimes we go back and look at some of these books to see that they still hold up. It's a testament to see, well, how good the stories or the ideas or the artwork was.
Yeah, and just so people understand, it's like you guys have been publishing for a while, even before this book was ever released. You guys have, how many books do you guys have under Beyond Publishing?
About 30. Yeah, close to 30. There are some that aren't available anymore, but let's say 26 books.
That's 30 women. That's 30 some series, or 30 30 issues, or
it's like, I think
30 separate books. Yeah.
Wow.
Because some of them are like issue 1 to 5.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. No, but and then a lot of those are actually available on Comixology.
Yeah. And Indefinite.
And Indefinite. Yeah. So if you search Beyond Publishing on Comixology, all those series actually come up. So if you this is just to inform the listeners that you also have like a very extensive amount of work aside from this Abrams book, and I want to get into that now. So specifically on Hard Ears, this is definitely an example of how I like the way you guys have introduced the culture of Caribbean culture, immersed that into not just somewhat of superhero comics, but also into fantasy, and there's some folklore there as well. What was that like as far as creating this world for Hard Ears? Did these things come naturally, or did you feel like you had to be very methodological or systematic about how you introduce the parts of culture, or did it was just, you're just gonna come off the dome or off the cuff, with these different aspects? Or how did you approach that whole idea?
It was a mixture of both. It actually started as a kind of brain fart I had. We used to meet at university under a tree on some benches, and we used to lay where we would go to like a restaurant and chill, laptops out, sketching, drawing, talking. And one day, because Nigel, we were actually working on issue 6 of Life and Death, and I pulled you one aside and I said, Nigel, I have this idea. What do you think? And I kind of blurred at Nigel, and he was like, all right, this is a lot. Let me think about it and get back to you. Because it was kind of like blah, 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 and all this information overload. Nigel, you could springboard from there.
Yeah. So Matthew came up with the idea of it, and it wasn't something that was like in my wheelhouse at the time. So I was kind of thinking of it a bit hesitant, and I was like, fantasy, and he was kind of telling me like the different concepts, because he had everything from the initial stage. He kind of had the whole world planned out. That's what I kind of really loved about it. He had the entire thing kind of planned out. The Caribbean like states, the different creatures, everything. Even the concept of vibes and everything he had planned out. And I wasn't at it. I was a bit hesitant because, as I said, it wasn't a genre that I was used to writing, and I just kind of said, well, you know what? I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to try it, because I just wanted to test myself and see if I could do it. So we then came together, and a lot of what my job entailed was kind of making sure that the story had a plot, pacing, and that kind of stuff. So it was like not only being like a writer, it was almost kind of being like a director and a story editor to the project. Because when you're dealing with an artist who creates a story, you get that energy and you get that kind of flow, but you need somebody to kind of bottle it and control it. Because if not, I mean, if I left Matthew to his own devices, sometimes Matthew would draw 3 and 4 pages that weren't in the script, and you got to kind of now say, well, how do we tie this back in? You've now kind of, so a lot of that. So it was a learning experience, and I see the need of why you need someone to be, in control or help control. You always say that there's always needs somebody to tell an artist when to put down the brush, kind of thing. So that's kind of what my job was. And even to this day, when we work, we kind of trash out things, and it's a really good relationship when you have two people who have a vision, but they're not looking at it the same way. Because as I said, you get someone who can kind of say, well, I think we should do this because of this. And I would then say, well, no, technically a story needs a point where it needs to get to this point. We can't just have it end here and stuff like that. So that was where I came into the project.
No, I love that. And you could tell that when I'm looking through the book, you could tell it's sort of like the energy does feel like, okay, yes, the art came first and then the story came. Or maybe it was like the art came first and then the dialogue around it. It was sort of built from, not necessarily from the bottom up, but you can definitely, the energy that's in this story, it starts with the artwork and then you follow the dialogue and things like that, helps, like, just like you were saying, that helps navigate you through this world. And I like the fact that this was in a book form instead of like issue by issue, because that way it gave you guys this opportunity to introduce, very large concepts like landships and jumbies and things like that, these cultural and also, fantasy oriented, characters that you created, and then, taking all these Caribbean elements and then created a whole new world around it. So being that, this is your kind of your brainchild, Matthew, can you give us can you put it on a bumper sticker for us as to what this story is about?
Well, the story is a action, adventure, fantasy, and is also a satire. And it's basically a liberation struggle. So it is a story that's also based on the socio-political environment of the English-speaking Caribbean. Because I'm a big history buff, I love current affairs. I'm always watching the news. And I love stories where the world is actually the character. And I kind of got that from reading a lot of Judge Dredd. Like if you read Judge Dredd, Mega City 1 is a character in itself. And Dredd is just your transportation through the Mega City. Yes, so I love worlds that are like that. And when I started to develop the story, I did a lot of research with it, a lot of time in museums and libraries. Also speaking to old people, because a lot of our history is not cataloged as it should be and is not documented. So there's a lot of oral history. And I thought, I'm using this medium. Why not use it to preserve some of that through these stories? So some of the characters in the book actually have a lot of cultural weight behind them, especially the landship, that organization. Other characters I pulled that are lesser known, like the Mungaza, other characters too. So I try to keep it very diverse. It's not only Barbadian folklore, and there is like Barbados is the anchor because I'm a Barbadian, but there's a lot of English-speaking Caribbean. And when you go through the Caribbean, a lot of our characters overlap. They may have different names, but it's the same character because they have similar origins, Afro-European, even Asian influences. If you look in the Southern Carolina region of the United States, we actually have very similar characters because if you look at history, there was a big exchange being a British colony with African persons, moving through the Caribbean, exactly, the Gullah Geechee culture. And that I always found fascinating. So I always wanted to do a book that would showcase that that culture and bring it, package it, and let the world see it.
No, and I love how you created, laid out those dialogue pages where you explain what these not just the characters, but different elements in the story, not just the city, but the landships, but this particular action scene. But like, for instance, here it's like it's almost like it feels like carnival costumes.
Yes.
But at the same time, but it's sort of like this is his not necessarily a superhero costume, but it sort of feels like that to me. At least that's where I come to the story. It's sort of like I'm looking for those elements. But I really like and I also really like how you guys introduce color in this book. Compared to traditional floppies and traditional
Yeah.
Comic book art. The colors in this book are really jump off the page, and it feels like you're in a different place compared to other comics. Was that intentional?
Yes. Even down to like the inking, there's hardly any pages where we use a true black to ink the pages. It's usually like a brown or a deep blue.
Okay.
Because I was inspired by, if you go through the Caribbean, there are these pubs, small shops, we call them rum shops, and they're brightly colored. Basically like wooden structures where they retail alcoholic beverage and snacks and food. And for every, what's he saying, Alan? Next to every church is a rum
There's a rum
shop.
shop. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because we're sugar producing countries, and alcohol is a very big part of our culture. And
And we kind
I
of
was
portray that in the book
influenced
too.
by,
You kind of portray that in the book too. That's where you kind of see a lot of these sugarcane fields and
yeah,
the industry around cane cutting and that kind of stuff. So that's a kind of a bit of the backdrop of it
but
too.
the colors were influenced from those shops when they fade in the sun. Because if you live in the Caribbean, everything tends to fade. We like a lot of bright and garish colors, but they don't last very long. So even our vehicles, your houses, even your clothing, you go in the sun long enough, everything starts to bleach out and fade. So in the book, I use a lot of pastels next to bright colors. I then use a rich black. I faded the ink into like browns and deep blues, and I also used it as a way of breaking up the acts. So like you'll notice some pages turn from blue to brown. So that was kind of like a storytelling technique that I was experimenting with.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. Can you guys tell me? So how did it come about that you guys were approached by John Jennings and Abram Books, and how did that all come about?
Yeah, Matthew would probably know. Matthew could tell that one.
Yeah, because what happened was they were at the same convention here, the Anime Con. There was an exhibit by the United States Embassy, Bridgetown, and it was the Black Kirby exhibit, and it was mobile,
Okay.
and it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
the art. John's art was in there, and we reached out.
Stacey Robinson as well.
Stacy,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And although we didn't meet in person, we then met on Facebook because I was like blown by this exhibit, and I was like, wow, and the art, the way John does his art, it reminded me of almost like lino blocks. Anybody ever did lino printmaking? That's a big thing in Caribbean schools when we do art. Alan, you probably did.
Yeah, I did that in school.
Lino
carvings, and then you print it.
Yeah. And
Me too.
the way John treated the artwork, I was like, wow, I need to reach out to this guy. And we then corresponded for quite a while on Facebook. We became friends, and we would speak. We would talk about different things. And then one day, John reached out to me, and he said, well, he's going to be curator on this imprint for comics from people of color, and a diverse comic portfolio on behalf of Abrams Publishing. And it would feature African American comics and comics from the diaspora and ethnic comics. And I had a book that was nearly finished. And I think, Nigel, we were actually in the process of working on the final book.
Yeah, of the same hardware series. We were just finishing up when John kind of came to us with the idea. And he made a presentation to Abrams, and they kind of loved it. And then we just kind of went full steam ahead to try to finish up the book in time to meet the deadline. And that's basically how we kind of got into Abrams, basically.
So what is it? What is the whole being a part of the book world been like for you guys?
It's been very exciting. It's always been a dream of ours. I mean, we've always been self-publishing comics, and it's been something that we have been doing even before we met each other. Alan, you were always writing. I was always writing and drawing. And so just to, I guess, have that further step is very encouraging,
Yeah.
very exciting. We're very grateful for the opportunity, and we're very proud to be able to showcase to the world um, the our stories and ideas. We hope that we're bringing something that people would love and they will be unique to them. That's why like all of our work has a Afro Caribbean kind of theme because that kind of sets us apart, and that's what we know. We always do create from within, you know. So our work is authentic. The concepts are true to what we know, what we grew up and what we saw.
So this question is for Nigel. So what is your workload like? As far as writing, as far as the other titles that you have on your roster, it's like basically like what are you guys working on now, and what are you trying to get out there?
Okay, right. So right now, me and Matthew are working on an anthology series called Diary of the Stray Dogs. So for me, I write a lot of stuff. If it's not just jotting down notes or ideas, I try not to leave anything to be lost. So if I come up with a concept, or if I come up with an idea, I have a notebook and I just write it down. And I may not get back to it right away. And then there's other times where I would just bang out 2 and 3 scripts, and there's not even enough artists to kind of to do the work. So what I try to do is try to keep creating all the time, even if at this time it wouldn't be able to work on it. That way you don't lose any ideas and you feel as though you're still doing something. So I try also to branch out into different genres. So the next book I'm doing is more sci-fi, more science fiction.
Okay.
I did urban kind of crime drama before. I worked on a fantasy with Matthew. So right now I'm writing a science fiction. And then I'm also writing another book, which is more space, hard science fiction kind of thing. So I just try to create what I like and do the best I can. That's all I can do.
Are you working with artists in Barbados? Or are you reaching out to people?
Out? No, I've started to work with international artists. I did a book with a guy from Spain. I worked with a colorist from the Philippines. I work with artists from Barbados. The majority of the work I've done has been people from Barbados, but I'm open to work with anyone, even write for anyone. I've reached out to other people, and certain projects have fallen through. Certain things are like on the back burner for now. But I'm trying to always create, because sometimes when I try to step away from it and say, well, I'm not going to do it, I feel as though a part of me is missing. You know, I feel as though, and I actually enjoy it. Even the creation process, every part of it, I just kind of enjoy it. So it's my love. I tell people you got to kind of love comics to do it, because it's a hard job and it's a tough job to break through and to get appreciated for.
You know, this is a weird question, because the first book that you guys put together seemed so polished as far as the artwork and the story, and just the whole overall marketing around it as far as beyond publishing. But was there ever a time where you guys, you know, being that so much of comic book culture is, you know, American or Western or European or anything like that, did you guys ever experience any type of feeling, type of like imposter syndrome when it comes to comics or creating comics?
Well, for me, well, I'll say, for me personally, right? Me and Matthew we're different, and that's why we kind of work together so well, because we kind of balance out each other. as a creator, sometimes I personally do feel that imposter syndrome kind of thing. And what it pulls you out of it for me is when you interact with fans or you get a review and someone actually says, hey, and it could be just one person, when is your next book coming? I really enjoyed that book. Or the other day, some guys were talking about some characters I wrote. And to see, as a creator, you want people to be discussing the characters, even to a point where they're saying that you as a creator, you have it wrong. And that's what you want. You want people to just get involved and love your stuff. You know what I mean? So you can get it a bit. It wasn't really though from a cultural standpoint because it wasn't a Western book. It was just sometimes you don't think you are doing enough sometimes.
Yes, exactly. What about for you, Matthew?
Yeah, I don't feel that way because I don't think that anyone corner of the globe could necessarily own comic books. I mean, from the time the Egyptians were putting hieroglyphics on walls and cavemen were writing in caves, those are forms of comic books. So I believe that it's just a genre that I've chosen. And obviously, I'm influenced by stuff that I grew up reading, whether it was Marvel or the UK comics or any other book that I would have seen. You take what you learn and you kind of end up doing your own style. The stuff that I do, I mean, is probably not correct. Is probably not traditional, but is experimentation. And then it kind of becomes associated with where you come from. So like how I color is a little different, how I draw or how I pace the story may be a little different. Some people say that the way I write is more like a folk story, more so than how Nigel writes. And I tend to write more like a folk story. So a folk story or a Greek story, one of those older stories, has a different form of writing than a traditional story, and the stuff that they do that you wouldn't really do in a movie, but it works because it is this fantasy.
Right. Like this page, for example. Right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, like this page here, how we kind of personify the hurricane. It doesn't really make sense if you really think about it, but you've been reading it so long, so it kind of makes sense.
No, at least to me, it does. I think only because we've already personified these things with human names already. So it's nothing to actually illustrate them in somewhat human form. So, and I like that page as well, only also because
thank you.
A lot of those characters, again, they resemble the designs resemble Caribbean costumes or carnival costumes. And I like the way you guys incorporated that. So like that's now that figure is a part of this world. Like he's not just a folktale. He actually has a purpose in this story. And I like the way you guys, brought that in. So along those lines, what do you guys, what has been inspiring you guys now? Oh, well, before I get there, I wanted to piggyback on what you said as far as your form of storytelling, at least definitely in this book, because I did an interview with Junie Ba, and he said something similar, whereas it's like he tends to lean towards storytelling that's more traditional, like the storytelling that we were raised around, as opposed to basically creating a franchise. Right. So sort of like you're just writing a story that's going to be a part of this larger global, either movie series or television series or movie franchise and things like that. You're not writing. So almost you're writing for a machine as opposed to writing a story. that's like that can be passed down, that can be shared with, and I think that's to a degree. I think that's why Black Panther to a degree worked, because it was a superhero movie, but it didn't necessarily feel like a superhero movie.
Yeah, it felt like a folk story. Felt like something traditional that was,
Yes,
is this something ancient? Like, is this a
right.
legend?
And it was ambiguous enough to, like, you could put it anywhere in the African diaspora, and it felt like it belonged there. So you could put it. It felt kind of American, but also it felt kind of African or Caribbean.
Yeah.
It didn't necessarily stay in one place in that regard. It was like it wasn't necessarily owned by one particular culture. And then, like you all did in your story, it's sort of like then it created a world in and of itself, by introducing all these different cultural aspects.
Yeah, to say something to what you just said, I've talked to a lot of creators, and everyone is kind of rushing to the finish line, which is to get a franchise that will get an animated series, get a movie, get a Netflix deal, and they're not taking time to enjoy the creation or to create the world. So they start sometimes too big. So something about Black Panther, which you may not realize, or what makes Black Panther work so well, is Black Panther comes into the Marvel universe, but it can be cut out from itself because it's not tied into all the other. It didn't go too heavy with Thanos and all that stuff. It was like, this is Black Panther, this is this world, this is what it is. And it had very little crossover even with some of the other heroes and stuff, so you didn't have that much cameos. But then when it did the end game, you saw how it did fit into the world, and it fit perfectly. So, but I find a lot of creators are coming where these people come in with massive, epic worlds, Game of Thrones level setup, but they haven't even created stories, they haven't created characters, because they look at comic books right now as a shortcut, because there's so many things we look at on Netflix. Everybody says that's a comic book. People think, well, the best way in is to use comic books as a backdoor to launch your franchise and to launch this, when that doesn't work if you don't do it properly. Because writing a comic book and writing a movie or writing a franchise is not the same thing.
Right. No, I see that a lot. And I see people entering into the comic book business, but not necessarily, but at the same time, totally oblivious or still trying to figure out the comic book culture or the comic book art form, the medium itself. Writing, like for instance, the script writing, it's not. There's an art form to comic book script writing compared to movies or writing prose or anything like that. It's a unique art form in and of itself, let alone comic book illustration isn't just illustrating. It's about it's a lot of design involved, which you wouldn't know if you just jump into it, as far as page layouts, page turns, which is a concept a lot of people
don't do.
A lot of beginners.
I know people who try to launch comic books and series, and they've never read a comic book. Never read a comic book. And I'm like,
yep. And you get it in this, and social media. It's like it's a ton of people out here that's like, I got a story. How do I make a comic book? And it's sort of like, I don't know if I could. It's like maybe you should start with. Actually, I've actually gone on record and saying like you should make a comic book. Make one. It's like make a short mini comic. You know what I'm saying? If you've never done it,
because it's a different experience.
Yeah, it's like just even if it's just a one-page story, like try to make a comic strip, something. It's like, because what you'll notice is that it's like, you immediately find yourself in a different headspace once you actually attempt it. Then it becomes clear as to exactly what it is you don't know, where you need to get help in, the things you might be good at in this genre. You might find that you're this genre, you know, it's not necessarily for everybody. Not to, you know, kick anybody out. I'm just saying that it seems like it's so hot right now, kind of, that it's just like you get a ton of people that's coming in, you know, really just really green as to the whole art form in and of itself. What are you guys geeking out over right now? Is anything, as far as anything local, anything on the indie scene, even on the big, even in the big two? What is it that that's been inspiring to you guys?
Well, I take inspiration from so many things. So for me, I have a weakness for science fiction and a certain type of science fiction. So certain things will get a pass even if it's not that good because it's a sci-fi, and I like science fiction. I like anything to do with mercenaries, army, military, action, genre. So I kind of draw from so many different points. I watch a lot of Netflix. When I'm working a lot, I just kind of sometimes just catch what I can. And then I'm a person who I don't get into the nitty gritty of something because I'm a child of the 80s when video games and movies, you have to kind of use your imagination too. So when I see people bitching about CG on some, I'm like, back when I was watching stuff, we was watching things with a green screen. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you had to, when you think back of what you think these great movies were, you sit back and watch Indiana Jones and stuff, you realize that you as a person viewing it had to use a bit of your own imagination, playing video games back on Nintendo, the graphics and that kind of stuff. So I just kind of enjoy a lot of stuff. I try not to nitpick about stuff, but I watch everything. Once someone says it's good, and I even watch bad movies too, because you can learn from bad media too, because you can learn from the mistakes that things make. You can see things and say, if I was to do that, I would do that differently. So I just try to absorb as much art from video games to movies. The only thing and comic books. I read a lot of comic books, especially when I'm going into create a comic book. There's nothing like reading a bunch of books to get your head back into that headspace of, as you said, like page turns, see what people did, how the art form has evolved. Because every couple of years when you go back at books, somewhat, you know, they're not the same £9, but people come up with different concepts. So I try to read a lot of books and absorb a lot of the media.
Okay. How about you, Matthew?
I am very big right now into horror. I was always a fan of horror. I love American Horror Story, that series. I'm a big fan of that. I love how it starts one way and then it ends up like all the way left. I love that. It's ridiculous, I love that kind of storytelling. I also like that recent series on Netflix with it was this witch. One was like 1994 and one was 1976 and one was 16 something.
Oh yeah.
Fair Street.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then, but I'm also a science fiction, just like similar to Nigel. I watch variety of genres, so I do watch a lot of science fiction as well. I was big into Babylon 5 growing up. I also like to watch ridiculous anime. So like there was a series called Grappler Baki, and the story writing was so ridiculous. I was like, you know, the artwork also was ridiculous. And I watched the original movie and then I saw the Netflix series, you know, and I became hooked on that. You know, my friends were laughing at me for watching it, but there's something about anime sense of humor that is so ridiculous that it, you know, I find that to be fascinating.
So do you see yourself creating like the horror is very big right now?
Yeah.
Do you see yourselves publishing a horror title anytime soon?
Yeah, the first title I ever did, this before Beyond Publishing, but it's in Beyond Publishing now. It was a horror called Heartman. And that also is available on Indefinite. And is it on
Yeah,
Comixology?
I think it's on Comixology also.
Yeah, and I actually did that in 2007. It's a very long book, about 300 pages. It's split in two books, but I'm actually completing the third book, and I'm going to put all of them together and colorize it. And at the time I did that book, it is in my drawing style, but it has a manga aesthetic. So it's like screen tones, black and white, grayscale, and is based off of a Barbadian folk tale about this entity that, or people, my grandmother used to tell me the stories of where that they keep you inside at night. They say if you wander or you're out late, the heart man will come and kidnap you and steal your heart. And he was basically like our Freddy Krueger, like a slasher film. And apparently it was based off of an actual murder that took place in the turn of the century. And it was unique because it's one of the few folk characters that is unique to Barbados, as far as we know. I speak under correction. And then what happened was around the 80s and the 90s, we had these mysterious killings called the Canfield murders. And they never found who was doing it. And I kind of base my adaptation of the folk character on those real life events. And I was inspired also by Jack the Ripper, because I love historical events too. Sometimes fact is wilder than fiction. And being a former British colony, the story kind of ties the two events that they overlap.
So wait, so you said like 300 some pages. Like, how did you pull that off? Like,
well, what happened was I was.
Did you have like actual assistants, like in like more like a traditional mangaka? Like they have no, you had like 2 or 3 like little kids back there. Like,
I wish. What happened was I don't think when I started the first book, I wasn't working yet. I was doing my bachelor degree. And summers back in those days used to seem really long. Like, I don't know if it's because I was younger, but a summer used to feel like a year. And it felt like I had all the time in the world. You know, you didn't have responsibilities then either. You didn't have bills or anything. So I could just, you know, have fun and then go in my room and draw this comic. And I had this system where I would do a page a day. Every page took a lot of work. A page every 2-3 days, you know, depending how complex the scene was. But an average of a page a day. And it took me probably a year and a half to do the first book and 2 years to do the second. But it didn't seem like that long because I was having fun. I didn't have a deadline. It was just something I was doing. You know, it was an enjoyable, it was actually stress relief. So when I started working, and that's when I finished the second book, you know, if I had a stressful day at work, I would, you know, diffuse and stuff by just going in my room, playing some music and drawing this book.
Wow, that's 300 some pages, man. That's inspiring in and of itself. We got about 10 minutes left here. What did you?
And that's the 2 books when you combine them.
Yeah. Yes, and it's called Heartman, volumes 1 and 2. Those are available on Comixology. I'm looking at it right now. So what do you guys want to leave out on? What do you guys have coming up in with Beyond Publishing, or do you have any more work coming through Abrams?
Me and Matthew are working on, as I said, we're working on a book, Gary the Stray Dogs, right now. And that's what
I had a question about that. Is this like this anthology going to be featuring creatives from the island, or is this some from
a mixture?
Mixture. It's actually there's a story
So
in there that
I've
I did.
included
Yeah.
Tristan Roach from Barbados and
And
the two guys from Spain.
yeah, a guy from Spain, a guy from Philippines. He's also on there.
Okay.
So that's why it's kind of like an anthology where it's, you ever saw like you remember they had a Matrix anthology where everything was kind of set in the Matrix world. It's kind of
Yes.
done like that. It's kind of like that. So I kind of created it so that I could write different types of stories and have the characters featured throughout without having to do this thing where you tie yourself down to a timeline, and
Yes.
I could do shorter stories too, because
Mhm.
a lot of people can't write shorter stories, and I
No,
find
right.
that shorter stories is where it's at, because especially if you're an indie creator,
Mm-hmm.
when you come and you decide that you're going to do something that's 12 issues and you're putting out one issue a year, you're going to finish that in 12 years. So
Yeah.
I started to write shorter stories and try to wrap them up as quick as possible for the sake of the readers, so that someone gets something one and done, and if they have to wait 2 years to get something again, one and done. So that's the concept behind that book.
No, I like that that approach as far as writing shorter stories, because that is an art form in and of itself. Being able to write, a 4-page or 8-page story, even a 12-page, like one shot, like it's beginning to end in one story, one book.
Yeah.
I think there's a definitely an art to that, and I think it's definitely necessary because, and that's something I've noticed. This is something I've seen John Jennings do. Him and Stacy, Damian Duffy, they tend to work fast, quality work, but they really move fast. And I like the fact that they sort of have inspired everybody that they brought in to sort of work. Not necessarily, I don't know what kind of, slave drivers they were on you guys, but I'm just saying, like, I do know that they work fast. I know, like that. I think Stacy put out Across the Tracks in like in less than 8 months or something like that. It was
Wow.
just a crazy
Yeah,
timeline, like within a year for that book. But I think it was less than that. But
I think what fuels that too is their passion
yes,
for this art form. Because when I work with Nigel, I'm able to finish within a year, with full book with him, which is pretty quick, well working full time and having other responsibilities. But I have a passion for it. So like, if I don't get a week where he gets a comment in, I start to get restless. And talking to John, I believe he's one of those persons too, where he needs to have at least a day in his week where he's producing. Because whenever I talk to him, he's always producing. So I know he lives and breathes comic books. And I'm on Stacy's Facebook as well, and I see that he's always posting something new. There's always something going on. So like I know that they're living and breathing this genre, the comic book life is what I call it.
yeah. And you gotta, and like Nigel said, you definitely got to love it, because it don't always necessarily love you back.
No.
No, but it's like at the same time, I've learned to sort of like embrace that idea, not so much because what you find, especially in media, is there are a lot of articles where you see like the artists or they share the struggles, which I get, and they sound really bitter as to say, okay, this company's not paying me this, or they're not treating me right, and all this kind of stuff. Well, and I get that from as far as, okay, now that's the industry, you're dealing with the business.
Yeah.
But it's not, the art form didn't do that to you. You know what I mean? It's like, it's like the story didn't do that. That has nothing. It's like, I wish there was more discussion to sort of separate that from the actual art form, from the actual, idea of creating a comic book. It's sort of like there's so much talk and hype around, the movies, the who owns what. all that stuff. And it's sort of like the whole idea of getting the artwork on the page and, telling these, fantastical stories gets lost in all that. So, which is weird because this is a storytelling medium.
Yeah.
There's a certain joy that you get from
Yes.
producing a book.
Yes.
For me as a writer, and the reason why I produce so much to a point I started to seek out other artists is like after a hard day's work, and I knew I had pages coming in. There's nothing like checking your emails, seeing a finished page come in that you sent to the artist, you discussed it, and then he puts his own spin on it, or he did something to it, and you're just kind of like, wow. It's an excitement. And as you said, when you then see other people who are in the industry, they're better, or I know other people who write books and they then step away and they have nothing to do with the process of the creation. I'm like, how are you doing that? Because I enjoy every aspect of it. I enjoy being able to see, and then you have to kind of take a little bit of a hands-off approach, let the artist breathe a bit, because you can't, you can't stifle the artist. You can't be like, I want this or this, and he has to be. You're supposed to spit out an idea, and he's supposed to interpret it, and you work together, kind of thing. And it's as I said, as you said, it's an art form, and that's what makes it different. It's an art form.
I should have asked this at first. It's like, so did you guys like click the first time that you guys put together a book, or was it like, did y'all have to really like duke it out before?
No, I think that's what made the partnership work so well.
Yeah.
And it's good and bad. It's good and bad because when you do click, so we've been working together for a long time. So we've kind of gotten over a lot of different hurdles, not bad hurdles, but bad habits. So for instance, when I came into writing comic books, not even knowing how to write a script. And we literally wrote kind of the first books we did over the phone.
Yes.
So
I remember those days.
So it's a case of me calling, telling you an idea, we trashing out 5 or 4 pages. Then you realize that when you do get back, it was like, you know what, maybe we should have written that down, or maybe I should have done this or that. So you kind of evolve from that, you know what I mean? And that's working on hard airs, working a bit on life and death. So we did have that synergy, which was great. I've worked with 4 artists, and each artist taught me different things. One artist working with the artist, from working with Matthew, not having to do, I don't know if you're familiar with the different types of script. So me and Matthew, when I write with Matthew, I write a loose script.
Okay.
Page descriptions, kind of gist of what's going on, do the dialogue on the back end. I have the dialogue, but I do the dialogue on the back end. Other people, I write a full script where I tell them how many pages, give them freedom to take out a panel or 2, add a panel, give them a basic script, and then come back and change. One guy even, he was telling me he wants to know the moods of the people so that he can get the expressions. So I take each of these things from different people. So different artists, I give them different types of scripts. So I do a full script. And then as you work with an artist too, a time I was trying to put up some pages on Instagram where I was putting up the script, the artwork, the pencils, and the finished artwork. And when you do a script with an artist, sometimes you will find that, especially if the artist is a really good artist, you do all your descriptions up front. So then by the end of the script, you don't have to do descriptions. So when I went to put up somebody's script was like, and he runs out into the street. And when you look at the artwork, the street is with all the different characters, and it has all, but that's because the world was created earlier up. So the script becomes less and less descript because the artist knows what he's doing. So I don't have to sit down and get into the point of, and I need to show a fire hydrant and a woman with his dog, and you know what I mean? So
right.
Yeah, so it's interesting working with each artist is different.
We tend to work more the loose style because what I enjoy about working with Nigel, before I do anything, on a script, I like to do a lot of research. So if Nigel was telling me, for instance, with Stray Dogs, the setting was a West African nation in the future, and there's a mixture of, there's a part of the country that's war torn, and then there's another part that's very futuristic. And I began to research and look at different conflict zones, as well as a lot of high tech cities in Africa, in Ghana, Nigeria, Sierra Leone, emerging African markets, and watch documentaries, even like series, and try to get the feel of the place, so that when I do, because I don't live there, and as an artist, I try to be very respectful, especially if I'm talking about a region that traditionally the media would have been marginalized. I don't want to
stereotype
or take part in that, because I do believe, and it's just a personal thing, I do believe as an artist we do have some sort of responsibility too, because we are storytellers, but we're very powerful storytellers too, because we're also putting down visuals, and we're reinforcing images. And imagery is something that's very impactful. That's why, like in Harders, even like the way I draw the characters, they look like you and I. There are people in there with not the traditional body types. There's a variety of body types, from the super muscular to the overweight to people that are skinny. Because that's the world that I grew up in, and they want persons, kids that look like us, to see this, to see themselves in the work. So I do believe there is, at least for me, there is some sort of like responsibility to, as an artist, not to an extent where it would kind of like damper your creativity, but I'm cognizant of certain things. So when I do this research, then I come back to Nigel, and I usually like to start with an establishing shot of the world. Even if it's not used, and I would show it to Nigel, and he's like, yes, there are. He's like, he wants it more like this, and he would send me a reference. I would go back, we would tweak, and we would try to get it perfect. And then the stuff too, we would disagree on stuff, and we could do that because we're friends. I know you can't always have the luxury of doing that when you're working on a project. Or the stuff too that I may believe in, and Nigel, what I like about Nigel, he would tell me, well, all right, show me how this will look, and I would show him Nigel. And usually he'd be like, well, okay, yeah. I can't see it, all right. I didn't see it that way, okay.
Gotcha.
When you're doing a creation and you have a creative team, you have to kind of give and go. You have to kind of know what battles to fight. I like to put a lot of faith in my artists. I've worked with a number of different artists. I've had artists who I told them the page was good, and then the next morning they came back, totally redid the page because they weren't satisfied with the page. Totally different angles and everything. And I was like, I like that, because you wasn't happy. So, well, okay, you wasn't there for the paycheck. You wanted to show me the best that you can do, kind of thing. So to find a team in this industry, you have to be very fortunate. I know a lot of people who are just basically mercenary writers or mercenary artists. So
on that note, I have to bring this interview to a close, and I really appreciate you guys giving me your time.
Thanks for having us.
No problem, man. Thanks for having us.
We definitely have to do this again, and hopefully I can make your Comic-Con one year. That sounds really exciting, man. On behalf of the Experience and Peep Game Comics, you're watching Black Comics Universe. On behalf of my guests, Matthew Clark and Nigel Lynch, my producer, Jerry, tonight, I'm Imani Latif. Thank you and good night. Good night.